Why did you come to the university hospital? You don't actually think a doctor can fix being uneducated and poor, do you? Mike smirked, clearly entertained by his own cruelty. I barely reacted, unimpressed. That's none of your concern, Mike. You're always so aloof. But no matter how prestigious the hospital, they can't cure ignorance or poverty. I didn't even grant him a fake laugh. His weak attempt at humor wasn't worth the effort. Before I could respond, a nurse rushed toward us, her face urgent. Doctor, we have an emergency. The patient is unconscious and in critical condition. Please come quickly. I turned to follow her without hesitation. My name is Jessica. I'm the eldest of 4, and when I was in elementary school, our father passed away, leaving my mother to raise us alone. His debts swallowed everything he left behind, forcing my mother to work endlessly just to keep us afloat. At her request, I dropped out of high school and took a factory job to support my siblings. If I could ease their burden and give them a chance at a better future, I was willing to sacrifice my own. Then, at 18, everything changed. My supervisor, Mike, kept inviting me to dinner, and over time, I developed feelings for him. When he finally asked if I'd consider dating him, I said yes. 2 years later, on my 20th birthday, he proposed. I thought I had found love. Mike knew from the start that I hadn't finished high school. Education doesn't matter when you love someone, he reassured me. He treated me as an equal, never looking down on me despite our differences. At least, that's how it started. Over time, his attitude shifted, the kindness faded, replaced by cold indifference. Do you even realize who's been supporting your lifestyle? You should be more grateful, he scoffed one evening. His words stung. When we married, he insisted I quit my job. I had wanted to keep working, but he convinced me otherwise. I want you to focus on our home, a warm meal, a clean house, that's all I ask. I complied, even though it meant sending less money to my family. Now, he saw me as nothing more than a burden. I actually want to work, I said cautiously one evening, testing the waters. He laughed. And do what? Who would hire a high school dropout like you? Just focus on your role here. His words cut deeper than I expected. Had I made a mistake? His allowance kept shrinking, and I knew if I complained, he'd blame my budgeting instead of his control. So, I stayed silent, covering the gaps with the little savings I had. But as I watched him sip his drink, something inside me shifted. I'm still young, I could start over. Mike likely hadn't noticed how distant I'd become, too confident in his assumption that I was helpless without him, but I wasn't. Again and again, I tried to talk to him, to explain how I felt, but he always had an excuse, too tired, too busy, too uninterested, and then, one night, his disdain was clearer than ever. I don't have time to talk to someone with such a low educational background. That was it. That evening, after cleaning up from dinner, I made my decision. I walked to him as he lounged in front of the TV, my throat dry but my resolve unshaken. We need to talk. He glanced up, indifferent. I held out the court documents and the lawyer's letter, meeting his gaze without hesitation. I think it's best if we get a divorce. A deep frown formed on his face. I braced myself for shouting, 4 accusations. But he just stared at me in silence. I watched as Mike's fists clenched, his face turning red with anger. Despite his fury, he held back, forcing himself to stay composed. After a long, tense pause, he finally muttered, barely above a whisper, "Someone with your level of education." His grip tightened even further, and his eyes burned with resentment. I instinctively took a step back. Then, his voice erupted. You think you have the right to challenge me with just a high school diploma? You think you can suggest a divorce to your husband? I refused to back down. I had endured enough. Blinking away the sting of unshed tears, I held his gaze, unwavering. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Silently, I lifted my phone and turned the screen toward him. Messages between him and a female coworker filled the display, clear, undeniable evidence of his affair. It seems you've had no problem buying her gifts, even while you claimed we were struggling financially. If I'm so unnecessary to you, then free me from this marriage. For the first time, Mike was speechless. He had never imagined I would have proof. He opened his mouth, searching for a response, but all he managed was a smirk laced with cold amusement. Living with someone so simple can be exhausting. I needed some occasional refreshment, he admitted without remorse. Then, as if our conversation meant nothing, he turned back to the TV. The emptiness of his response cut deep, but I didn't let it shake me. Without hesitation, I walked over and turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence. He shot me a disgruntled glare, but I stood my ground, ignoring the tremble in my legs. I held out the divorce papers once more. Sign them, please. Why was he so resistant? He despised me, resented our marriage, and had already moved on with another woman. Why wouldn't he just let me go? If he believed I had no right to demand a divorce, then why hadn't he been the one to suggest it? I would have taken the humiliation of being left. I just wanted to be free. Mike sighed heavily, finally picking up the court documents. But then, his lips curled into a smirk. If you want a divorce so badly, then repay every cent I've spent on you. Cover all the living expenses I've provided, and I'll consider it. That's ridiculous. That's impossible. Exactly. He chuckled. You're just an uneducated housewife. Do you really think you can afford freedom? In the 3 years we had been married, the money he had given me for rent, groceries, and household necessities had added up to over $333,000. Even though he had been giving me less recently, there was no way I could repay that amount. I had barely managed to save anything after covering our household's basic needs. Mike watched my stunned silence with satisfaction. And yet, beneath my panic, something inside me ignited. He thinks I'm stuck. He thinks I'll crumble, that I have no choice but to stay. I'll prove him wrong. 12 years later, the hospital lobby bustled with activity, yet I stood still, momentarily disoriented by the maze of hallways. I clutched a map of the facility, trying to navigate my way through the unfamiliar corridors. Then, a voice called out behind me. Jessica? I turned, surprised. A middle-aged man stood there, studying me with a mix of familiarity and something sharper, annoyance. I hesitated. I'm sorry, do I know you? He scoffed. Do high school dropouts forget faces, too? I can't believe you don't recognize your ex-husband. I blinked, piecing together the features of the man before me. Then it clicked. Mike. He smirked, satisfied, settling into a chair in the lobby. He crossed his arms. Why are you here at a university hospital? He asked, his tone mocking. You don't actually think a doctor can fix being uneducated and poor, do you? Amused by his own words, he chuckled. I remained unfazed. It's none of your concern, Mike. You're always so cold, he sneered. But no matter how prestigious this hospital is, I doubt they can cure ignorance or poverty. His attempt at belittling me didn't faze me in the slightest. At that moment, a nurse rushed toward us, urgency in her voice. Doctor, we have an emergency patient, critical condition, unconscious. Please come immediately. I stood without hesitation, accepting the white coat she handed me. From the corner of my eye, I caught the stunned expression on Mike's face. His eyes widened as he processed what was happening. "I'm sorry for calling you in on your first day." The nurse apologized quickly. "We had no other doctors available." I gave her a reassuring nod before walking away. Mike remained frozen in place, still clutching the hospital brochure, his mouth slightly open in shock. I didn't spare him another glance. I had an emergency to attend to, and a future I had built for myself. I handed him the hospital brochure, watching his stunned expression. His disbelief was almost amusing. "I'm a doctor," I said simply. Even after the emergency treatment, I still had time before my official shift began. Instead of wandering around, I decided to get a head start. As I reviewed my next patient's chart, my breath caught in my throat. "Mike." I stepped into the examination room, and for the second time that day, we locked eyes in mutual shock. His usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by an unfamiliar unease. He sat stiffly in the chair, gripping the armrests. His medical file confirmed what I already suspected: he had heart problems. He had been referred to this hospital for further evaluation. I took a steadying breath, regaining my composure. Personal history aside, he was just another patient. The examination proceeded in tense silence. Mike, clearly unsettled, couldn't mask his discomfort. When I finished, I met his gaze. "Is there anything else you'd like to ask?" His jaw tightened. "How did someone like you, a high school dropout, become a doctor?" A nurse beside him glanced at him in surprise. I could have brushed off his question, but instead, I chose to answer. "My father was a doctor." My voice was calm, measured. "Just to clarify, I didn't drop out of high school because of poor grades. I had once admired my father, despite his flaws. He had been a brilliant physician but a reckless man, his earnings squandered on alcohol and nightlife, leaving our family drowning in debt. Still, he had instilled in me a passion for medicine. From the moment I understood what a doctor was, I had wanted to become one. My mother believed in me wholeheartedly, always saying, "Jessica will surely become a doctor." But when my father passed away, our financial struggles forced me to enter the workforce. My dream was put on hold, but it never disappeared. While working, I earned my high school diploma and fought my way into medical school. Mike scoffed. "There's no way you had the money for that." My mother saved what little we had. I worked and applied for scholarships. I replied matter-of-factly. He chuckled, but it was empty. "Scholarships? You?" I held his gaze. "You mocked me for being uneducated, but you never knew the whole story." Mike's expression darkened, his hands curling into fists. The nurse gently reminded me that our consultation time was almost over. I turned away, finalizing his chart for the next patient. Before closing his file, I spoke once more. "About the living expenses you once demanded I repay. I can pay them back now, double, if you'd like. My current salary surpasses yours." A deep crimson spread across his face. His pride had been shattered, and he knew there was no way to regain control of the conversation. With a loud thud, he pushed himself to his feet. "Just wait. You failed, doctor. I'm filing a complaint." He spat, storming out. I let out a slow exhale. I had expected hostility, but I didn't expect to feel so relieved. Mike's life had unraveled after our divorce. His affair had been short-lived. His co-worker, the woman he had risked our marriage for, had rejected him. Word of his infidelity had spread at his company, staining his reputation until he was forced to resign. His pride took hit after hit, first by a woman he had pursued, then by his colleagues, and now, by me. He had drowned his bitterness in alcohol and cigarettes, a habit he later admitted likely contributed to his heart condition. Now, he was preparing for major surgery. Despite everything, I remained professional. As his doctor, I would provide the best care possible. Mike still visits my clinic for routine checkups. One day, during an appointment, he asked, half joking, half serious, if I would consider remarrying him. I declined without hesitation. My life is full. I live with my family, supporting them as they once supported me. My work is demanding, but it's fulfilling. I have no regrets. Occasionally, I look back on our marriage. Not with longing, not with hatred. Just a quiet, lingering emptiness.